security analyst. Good evening to both of you. I appreciate you joining. Chris Wecker, I'm going to start with you. I want you to take us behind the scenes, if you will. What is the FBI doing right now to determine whether this was a hate crime?
Well, working with their partners with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the Sheriff's Department, and the police departments, I am sure they're looking at electronic media at this point, if they haven't reviewed it already, any social media, any mobile phone, any laptop, any postings this person made. And I did have an opportunity to talk to someone very high level in the investigation. It does look like this individual was deeply disturbed, that he was he's confessed already. His family has provided information about him, and he was basically targeting the business, not necessarily the ethnicity. Although it's still an open question, and there's still some more evidence to review.
Also, we're learning that the suspect was in sex addiction rehab just last year. Law enforcement sources are telling CNN that he told them that he thought, about killing himself, but decided to help others. That's a quote from him, by targeting the spas instead. Look, if this is confirmed, couldn't he still be prosecuted with a hate crime for targeting women?
Yes, Don, and I think this is an important point that, race is definitely a basis for a hate crime, but in 2009, gender identity, sexual orientation, and disability were all added to the federal hate crime statute. So if there is a motivation based on any of those factors, those could still constitute a hate crime and be a basis for federal jurisdiction. But Don, I just want to add that this brings to the fore this idea of intersectionality. And this is the idea that someone can belong to two different groups that perhaps the law treats as distinct categories, but there is a specific harm when a person actually embodies both of them, and that you might miss if you're focusing on these separate categories. So in this case, Asian women, if we're only focusing on race or only focusing on gender, we might miss some of the specific harms that may accrue to a person that embodies this particular category. And I think that what we are seeing is some of the complexity involved in that particular idea.
So, Asha, listen, experts tell CNN that Asian women are uniquely vulnerable to violence. Talk to me about that, please.
Yeah, well, this is exactly what I'm talking about, that, there can be particular ideas, for example, a sexualization that is also intertwined with race that, that Asian women tend to deal with in a specific way. And this person came and, he didn't target strip clubs, for example. He really came to a particular type of business. Was that intentional? We don't know, but it does overlap with a specific ethnic community, and it does overlap with women who work there. So I think that we need to think about the ways that particular communities who embody different, bases of gender, racial motivated violence can be uniquely targeted in these kinds of situations.
Yeah. Chris, I want to add a couple things here, because the New York Times is reporting that organizations that track hate groups are warning about a phenomenon called male supremacy terrorism, driven by aggravated male entitlement and desire to preserve traditional gender roles. Could that be something that we're seeing with this shooting?
Hard to say, Don. I mean, honestly, there are times when someone just goes off. They're mentally imbalanced. They have inner demons. We've seen that time and time and time again. And I'm not discounting the potential for a motive here as a hate crime. I'm just saying there are times when people just go off. There are many deeply disturbed individuals out there, and the internet isn't helpful. The political rhetoric isn't helpful. There are a lot of things. This is the proverbial lone wolf that we're always talking about, and it doesn't. It only takes one or two things as that final thing to set them off.
Asha, I want you to talk about that, and I think I just realized not wearing my glasses or my contacts. I said aggravated male entitlement, aggrieved male entitlement, male supremacy terrorism driven by aggrieved male entitlement and desire to preserve traditional gender roles. What do you think of that?
Yeah, well, this is an ideology, right? And I think that there are analysts that have kind of watched the evolution of this. This is sort of the incel group. I think that it's true that most of these are lone wolf actors. I mean, this isn't an organization that has some kind of leadership or structure, but it is, based on this idea of an attack on masculinity. And there is a lot, in the dark web, in parts of the internet, groups that come together around a sense of loss about particular aspects of their masculinity. And, it has driven other kinds of violence. I mean, we've seen this in some of the shootings that have happened in the past as this being a motivation. So, it's hard to actually track this because it is not organized, and it can be something that someone gets radicalized into, just on their own on the internet. But I think, it gets to this idea of gender-based violence, I think.
Yeah. So we're having a bit of a breakup problem with your picture there, but we can hear you clearly, Asha. Chris, I want to ask you about the NYPD deploying counterterrorism forces to protect prominent Asian communities in the wake of these attacks. Are you concerned about copycats, Chris?
Always. And I have read up on this. There has been a spike in New York City and about 16 cities across the U.S. in Asian hate crimes. Although they're only about 4% of overall hate crimes, the past year it's been a 150% increase. So yeah, NYPD is always on top of their game. They have a great intel unit there, and they're just being proactive, and I applaud them for that.
Police, Chris, arrested a man from Texas outside Vice President Kamala Harris's official residence, and a D.C. police report obtained by CNN shows that he had an AR-15 semi-automatic rifle, 113 rounds of unregistered ammunition, 5 30-round magazines. No one is living there now, but what kind of alarm bells is this going to set off in D.C.?
That's a very serious incident. They apparently got a tip from I believe it was Texas, on that, and they were able to, and I'm sure there was some pretty frenetic investigation